We're going to use the 11th century as a date for the Romanesque period. The Romanesque is the first historic period ever to be named for an art style, and I think you're probably going to be able to remember this pretty well, and you're going to be able to guess the art style also, because it is the beginning of the name Roman. It will be a time period in Europe when folks are going to look back to Roman creations, particularly in architecture. And we'll see in a moment that it's going to be the Roman arch that's going to characterize the Romanesque style. This is a period in European history when we truly get stability and there's going to be no sliding back into a dark age. This is the period past the time of the conversion of the Vikings to Christianity. So we have increased stability in Europe. We also have an increase in population and an economic upturn as well. So the standard of living is going to rise. This is going to encourage the development of towns and commerce within those towns, and all of that is over time going to erode the feudal system, which had developed largely as a byproduct of the Viking raids. A feudal lord with his estate would welcome us, the peasants, into the castle walls to protect us during Viking raids, but in return we'd have to promise to work the estate, and we would end up becoming vassals tied to the land. That formulation is going to start to be eroded in the Romanesque. In this period, the church is going to have tremendous power, and it's going to be a period of great religious belief and conviction. And more than anything else, that is reflected in the pilgrimage routes. The routes that people took with animals, with carts, or on foot, walking across Europe to get to very holy destinations. The map that I have on the screen right now is a map of some of those, not all of them, but some of those routes. And if, for example, we started up here in Paris, we might actually come on foot in many cases all the way down to the southern part of France, crossing over the mountains, and then attempting to make our way to one of the great pilgrimage sites, the burial spot, it's believed, of St. James, Santiago de Compostela. The pilgrimages, in fact, will really drive the entire nature of the Romanesque period. At the end of your destination, there would be a great pilgrimage church. That pilgrimage church would have relics for you to visit, perhaps to touch, and perhaps also relics that could answer your prayers. We're going to talk a little bit more about the relics in a minute. The other feature of the Romanesque, of course, is the Crusades. And if you wanted to, you could think of these as armed pilgrimages, but pilgrimages to retake the Holy Land from the Muslims who controlled it in this time period. They're going to start in 1096, so smack dab in the 11th century, but they will run until, usually we use the date of 1291, so into the 13th century. Both of these activities, the pilgrimages and the Crusades, open Europe up to new ideas. And we'll talk about that as we go and take a look in particular at the pilgrimages. One of the features of the pilgrimages would be the great pilgrimage churches that are built along the pilgrimage routes. And let's take a look at one of those right now, Saint-Sernin, in the southern part of France. And that is located right here. The great church of Saint-Sernin. This is the grand pilgrimage church of Saint-Sernin in the southern part of France. We have an aerial and we also have a floor plan. And I'd like you to be able to see how the floor plan works by looking at the aerial. The central section, located right here, represents the nave of the church. On both sides, there are two sets of side aisles. And all of that should remind you of the Roman Basilica. The Christians began their church construction using the Roman Basilica, but as Christianity grew, they came to make that design their own by literally turning it into a cross. So we add what is referred to right here as crossing arms to the basilica, and then at the far end, usually the east, we add a rounded section which is referred to as an apse. So going down here to the aerial, this is the nave, this is the crossing arm, and this is the apse of our church. Along the sides, we have a set on both sides of two side aisles. One of the things that characterizes Romanesque churches would be their great size. One of their jobs was to be able to provide for a large number of pilgrims who come to visit the church and look at the relics. When we're thinking about pilgrims, I would also like you to think of them maybe as tourists, because they're coming from a distant location to visit your city. They want to be as close to the relics as possible, but they also want to enjoy your city and your hospitality. So one of the things we have to do is make it easy for them to move through the church. And we do that by providing good circulation. So if you come, you can enter the main door or the side door, and you can go along one of these side aisles, and you can keep going all the way around the crossing arm, and in fact you can continue around the apse and all the way around the other crossing arm, and you can go out along the other side aisle and exit, and you can do that without disturbing anybody who might be praying in the church or who might be engaged in celebrating the Mass, which would be taking place in this region of the church right here. This was designed to allow people to come to visit the church and to gain access to their goal, which was the relics. And the relics are usually located in these little projections all the way, in this case, around the apse of the church, but also around the crossing arms. These are chapels that radiate out from the body of the church, and each of those chapels would have contained a divine relic, believed to be a miraculous object that would allow you to be in direct connection with the divine. As part of the design to meet the needs of large groups of pilgrim tourists, the nave is longer than it used to be, so it's been lengthened. We're actually making the church bigger, and the side aisles have been doubled. So you can think about people moving in both directions along those side aisles. There are also upper galleries along the walls that allow people to circulate up there as well. So it has been designed to maximize the ability of visitors to come to this really large-scale monumental church. In addition to that, we've made some changes. Back in the day of Viking raids, churches tended to have wooden roofs, which went up in a blaze pretty easily. So in the Romanesque period, what we're doing is adding stone vaulting to the ceilings, and that resists fire. It's not that it's impossible, because there is wood above the vaulted stone ceilings, but it reduces the ability of the church to burn. So we're trying to fireproof our interiors. As a result of this, the interior of these churches tends to be reduced in light, so they're darkened interiors, but it also resonates like crazy, so that we have incredible acoustics that allow the music, and I'd like you to think Gregorian chant in particular, to resonate throughout the buildings. But the singing, the religious songs, would absolutely vibrate through the stone, and in particular be echoed off the stone roofs. This is another view, and I think I've borrowed this diagram from Smart History, in fact. It shows us the nave. It shows us the two side aisles. It also shows us the crossing arm, which is also referred to as a transept, because basically it cuts into the body of the basilica. And this is the crossing, and this would be the ambulatory. And again, we can walk directly around the arm of the building, over the ambulatory, and get to what's sometimes referred to as radiating chapels, which is where the relics would be located. This is a view inside San Sernin. as we're looking in through the nave, and it gives us a little bit of a sense of this kind of tunnel-like quality of Romanesque architecture. In order to support the massive weight of the stone ceilings, we have to strengthen the walls by reducing the space that we give up to windows. You can also see that very clearly this is a reference to the Roman arch that was invented and promoted by the Romans, and you can see a series of ribs running through the structure which echo one after the other on the way from your entrance point down to the altar, giving us the appearance of being almost in a tunnel, in a barrel vaulted structure, kind of enclosed, large but nevertheless enclosed. Each one of those ribs represents a division. Let's go back. Represents a division in the units along the passageway down the nave. So the design of this church is based upon an individual unit of measurement that has been duplicated and repeated throughout. So if you look at the side aisle, you take a little chunk here, one unit, it's duplicated over here. So we have two of those there, exactly the same unit of measurement, the duo located right here, and then two on the other side. It tells us that everything is evenly spaced. It also tells us that everything is compartmental. Yes, I'd like you to be thinking of Migration's metalwork, because the designing of metals still carries over to the mentality of the Romanesque. Okay. Returning to our nave view, you can see again the nod to the Romans, and that is the feature that gives us the designation, the Romanesque style. That's also true on the exterior of this. Even the windows that we're looking at, like one right here, is conceived of as a Roman arch. The radiating chapels, and this would be one of them, which almost look like they're afterthoughts that have been glued on this building, because each element of this is separate and compartmentalized, but even those convey the design of the Roman arch. The Romanesque then has a kind of heaviness to it, a solidity. It also has a geometric foundation and a sense of repeated modular units that characterize the style. Or, if it's easier to think of, individual compartments. To the pilgrim, however, this would have been a place of incredible spiritual intensity, particularly as the pilgrim approached the relics, and that was the point of the whole visit.